Hi, so I'm Jake Adams. I'm a composer currently based in Brighouse in West Yorkshire. My kind of interest really is in cross-cultural composition and related issues, kind of how we can draw ideas from cultures outside of the Western classical tradition, and whilst kind of taking into account post-colonial issues like cultural appropriation and exoticism. And I'm going to present a piece that has very little to do with that today. So the piece I'm going to be presenting is called Sky and Water. It is for solo guitar, classical guitar. And I wrote this piece as part of the Twisted Spruce online symposium in summer of 2020. Twisted Spruce is an organization based in Colorado, I think, and I was paired up with a guitarist called Chinawat Them Kunkum, who I worked with for 2 or 3 months on this piece before it was then presented in the concert. It was an interesting experience because I was obviously here in the UK and Chinawat was in Salzburg, so there was a lot of challenge there, and as I'm sure there has been for a lot of people working collaboratively in lockdown. I think I'll shut up and just play the piece. Oh, I'll stick the score in the chat before.
You could also share the score when you are playing the piece, Jake, if you want.
Yeah, sure. Would that be easier?
Yeah, that would be. I make you the house, a co-house. You can have a screen share. Yeah.
I'll just open the score on my computer because I haven't done that either. Cool. I should also mention the name of this piece comes from a print by MC Escher, which you can see. Can you see that there? So I'll probably talk a bit more about that in a bit, but yeah, the idea comes from this sketch and the shifting that you can see from a clear image of the bird to a clear image of the fish that you can't see behind the replace image, and how it slowly melds together in the middle. And I did this through kind of a noise to pitch spectrum. So I'll start playing the piece now.
Jake?
Hello?
I don't know if we're supposed to be able to hear anything, but I was just wondering if while you're sorting that out, we could just have a quick look at the what do you call it? The instructions, the notes on the score.
Sure. Could you not hear that there?
Oh, we couldn't hear anything. No.
Nuts.
No,
okay.
Jake, you have to share the computer sound as well when you're sharing the screen. That's why. There's a square bottom.
You know, I spend all my time telling other people to do that, and then as soon as I have to do it.
When you play, there is something near the share.
There we go. Sorry about that. My bad. Yeah, I will quickly put the symbols on. You can have a read of that. Just give me a thumbs up when you have read. Cool. Cool. I'll try again with sound. Can we hear this time? I think I'll just, if anyone's got any questions, please feel free.
Actually, I have an observation. Perhaps it's a question. I'm just wondering, in the first few minutes of the piece, I noticed that some of the sounds were very reminiscent of train themes. For example, a horn sounding on a train, even though it's done with a guitar, and the sounds at a railroad crossing when the gate goes down has a very distinctive jumble of sounds. And then also the repetitiveness of a train when it's on the tracks. It makes sort of a very repetitive sound as it's moving along. So I sort of, as I'm listening to it, I really evoke sort of a train theme. I don't know if that's something you ever thought of when you listened to it.
It's not something I was thinking about when I was writing it, but the repetition was something that I was exploring. Up until this point, my music had been very constantly having feeling like I constantly had to change, and that was very much kind of a result of, I remember a guitar lesson I had where I'd been writing a few riffs for electric guitar and writing a few songs, and my teacher said to me, just because you're playing it for this long and it feels fun for you to play for this long doesn't mean it's fun for someone to listen to for this long. Which kind of stuck with me for quite a while, and I actually think that the repetition in this was almost a push in the other direction for me, kind of saying, well, what if I do repeat for this long, and can I just tell the audience to put up with it?
Yeah, I think the repetition part is fine. What I was alluding to was the fact that those three specific examples that I gave in terms of the train horn, the sounds that you get when somebody stopped watching the train go by at the gates, and then the repetitive sounds, it created sort of a holistic auditory image in my mind of a train theme. I think the repetitive stuff is great, but I guess what I'm getting at is after the fact, obviously you didn't use that concept when you were composing it, but after the fact, when you listen to it now, can you sort of tap into the concept, and maybe when you listen to it again, that there seems to be some of these train images at an auditory level that come into play?
I think I'll have to have a listen to it again to hear that, because it's not something I'd really thought of, to be honest.
And it's all in the first 3 or 4 minutes.
Yeah, in the bit where it's just shifting between the noise and the pitched sound. Exactly. The repeated bits, yeah.
I like it. I think it's great.
I'll have to listen to it myself again. Yeah, Nate. I can't hear you, sorry.
Is that better?
Yes.
Okay, cool. Sort of going off of that question, is there an image or an idea that you get in your head when you listen to your piece, or when you were writing the piece?
So not so much when I listen to it. I was inspired by the print by MC Escher, Sky and Water 1. However, that was more on a conceptual basis than it was on a kind of trying to recreate the print. I have synesthesia, so I kind of tend to associate it more with colors and the colors going on within it, which is very personal, I suppose. And I do try to, one thing that in my music that I always feel is important to me is not have it, I never want my pieces to be programmatic. I think if like Murray was able to get the image of a train, and someone else was able to get the image of I don't know a frog on a rock, the image that the person gets to me is almost less important than as long as they are experiencing it and experiencing the music in some way. I obviously have my own personal associations with the colours that when I listen to it, and I am writing it very, very much for what I like. But yeah, the actual image that someone gets, as long as it's not an unpleasant image, I think, is I'm always happy for people to see whatever they like when they hear it. Ronnie?
Yeah, I was just wondering, a little bit to do with what Murray was saying about the train. I confess I'm a guitarist as well, classical guitarist. So yeah, I was just wondering, because you obviously must be very aware of the kind of timbre you're getting from the instrument if you're using those particular effects into what seemed to me very good effect. I'm just wondering, in terms of the performance and maybe some of slightly how the attack is, if you've got a name like Sea and Water, I'm guessing you're looking for something more flowing and a bit more, and not mechanical in the way I think Murray was describing. So I got a slight kind of mechanical, because it was really metronomic and really precise and kind of, and so I'm wondering if you were looking for something a little bit more sort of smoother and rather than some, I don't know if that's a thing with the performance, or I just wondered what you're thinking about that.
I think some of it is in the performance. Chinua had quite a limited time to learn the piece. We wrote the piece over summer. I had to send it to. He got the final version, I think, right at the end of August. Mm-hmm. In fact, no, he in the middle of August, and he had to submit his performance of it by mid-September, whilst also working on his masters and various competitions. He's a very busy guitarist he seems to have 100 things every day that he's doing. So he perhaps the performance is a little bit metronomic. Mm-hmm. I personally wanted it to be quite flowing and really get the flowing. I'm a guitarist myself, which is why I quite enjoyed writing this piece. So I kind of sat down and played around with the effects on the guitar and trying to get it smoothly moving between. And maybe if Chinua had, a bit less on at the time, or a little bit more time, or if someone else takes it, the kind of, I think particularly the breaks between the noise and the pitch could be smoothed over slightly, which possibly would help with how metronomic it is and making it feel a little less mechanical.
Yeah, I got I thought it was a very respectable performance. Like to do that, I would have been very tough with it. I just wondering about if you were probably looking for maybe sort of, I don't know, softer attack, and maybe some slight, not quite so punctuated in the tempo on the. It's pretty sort of, I don't know, kind of staccato kind of feel to it. But I did like the way that you got some sort of real glissandos as they were from when the fingers come off the fretboard and slide down the strings like that. Because I thought that was quite nice. And I think maybe, is that what you mean by you looking for some more smooth changes between some parts as well?
A little bit. It's funny. Nearly everyone who have had kind of comment on this piece has said that they really like the glissandoing between the chords. So that's achieved. I don't know if everyone saw in the notes, by rather than fretting the notes fully on the guitar, by just resting the fingers lightly on the string, almost like you would for a harmonic, but doing it within the fret so that you don't land on a harmonic accidentally. So the kind of shift in color that I was looking for was by just really slowly placing the fingers, and it does shift. The difficulty is you do get a bit of there is still a bit of a lurch between, the proper pressure that you're supposed to have on the guitar and the point just before that, where you're still getting a bit of a noise sound. But yeah, it's interesting. Sorry, I went on a slight detour there. the shifting and the glissando, it's really interesting because everyone always says they really like that, and I would say it's actually my least favorite part of the piece, that glissando. I spent ages trying to work out if there was a way to shift positions without to shift the position without getting that glissando, but there was no effective way to do it.
Yeah, but it's another element from this sort of smooth transition between different things, like onto the fretboard, off the fretboard, tasto, ponticello, and all the smooth dynamics. So it seems very coherent and consistent with the rest of the idea. So
yeah, it's probably just because I spent so much time trying to get rid of it that it's that one element.
Cool.
Thank you so much, Jake. I really love the piece and the idea of the noise and pitch. And I wanted to mention that point. Actually, you said, Ronnie said, it was interesting. You had a different layers, different contrast, but the piece has good consistency. I know as a composer how hard it is to make consistency and make contrast at the same time. Well done.
Thank you.
So I think we can go for the next piece with, do you have anything you want to add, or are you finished?
No, I'm happy to finish there.
Okay, thank you so much. We can go for the next piece with Nate Chivers.
Hi, everybody. Yeah, so I'm Nate. I'm a composer and an electric guitarist. And I study at the Royal Northern College of Music here in Manchester. I'm a PhD student, and sort of the things that I'm interested in are using the electric guitar in a classical contemporary music setting, as well as deriving material, like having basically pieces repeat themselves and deriving material from other pieces and then composing out from there, which you won't be heard in this piece because this is the first one where most of the material has since been derived from. So yeah, I'm just gonna play the piece. I'm gonna play a video, so I'm gonna put the score in the chat if that's all right. Cool. All right, bear with me for one moment. Cool. Here's the score, and now I will share that. Share sound. Share sound. Cool. Cool. Everyone can see that? Cool. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, before I sort of go on about what the piece is, does anyone have any questions about it?
Yeah, first of all, hi, and sorry for coming so late. My festival finished a lot later than I thought it would. Yeah, it's a really wonderful piece, and I'm so glad I came. I mean, I've already heard it before, but I came just in time. I have a couple of questions. Firstly, I can hear like some very distinct layers, which seem to be operating at the same time. And I was just wondering what kind of considerations you had to make to distinguish them.
Yeah. So in terms of the actual layers themselves, or like how to actually like put them all on one instrument?
Both, actually.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So the impetus for the piece was the first, basically I came up with just by noodling around that sort of that muted thing on the left hand, which is just that constant quaver.
Mm.
And I kind of liked that, but I realized you can make a piece out of it, but I think I would find it annoying. So I decided what would contrast well with that.
Mm.
And I decided harmonics. and you can do harmonics with just the right hand and actually create melodies and all and such. But and I also realized you could create counterpoint between both lines with these two techniques. And the problem is that both of your hands are doing completely two different things, and a lot of the difficulty in writing it was trying to figure out, is this possible? Is this not possible? Is this too hard? And it was too hard for quite a while, but yeah, no.
I can imagine. Yeah, and also I found it really fascinating the way the music sort of transforms. Like it seems like there's a very, very gradual transformation from a kind of very dampened sound to something which builds in resonance, like very progressively. And I was just, so are those bell-like sounds, are they harmonics, or how exactly did you get that? Like those sound later on?
Later on, like yeah. So yeah. Yeah, you mean sort of the those sounds that were going like that?
Yeah.
Yeah, those are harmonics, but they're all the guitarists in the room will know this. It's artificial harmonics where you can fret a note and then kind of works as a natural harmonic. You just go 12 frets above. So, and that actually was considered because the first part was entirely natural harmonics, which have their own sound. And then I decided in the middle to use artificial harmonics, sort of create a different timbre. And then go back to and then do a mix of both in the third part.
It's interesting that the artificial ones sound like they're louder or more resonant than the natural ones, which is unusual, isn't it? Usually on like stringed instruments, they're louder.
I am not an acoustician by any means, but I think part of it is because of the pickups and that it's getting picked up and that I could be very wrong. That because the natural harmonics are like basically further down the neck, it might not get picked up as well. Also, it should be noted I do switch pickups halfway through as well, which I switch to a more resonant pickup. When I say pickups, does that make sense to everybody?
Is it? Okay. Are you talking about the connection, the electronic, like?
Yeah, these are like it's a magnetic strip that picks up the frequencies of the magnetic poles that pick up the frequencies of the strings. That's what they're called. So
I do have one more question.
Yeah, shoot.
That is how you managed to create such a sophisticated like sense of dimension with one single instrument. That's just, it sounds like there are more instruments playing at the same time, and it's just incredible.
I don't know. I don't know. I'm not gonna. Thank you. I don't know how to answer that. It's a lot of work. Just a lot of work, a lot of trial and error.
Yeah. So what I meant more specifically is when you planned out the piece as a composition, what kind of considerations did you have to take? Like, I'm going to try and create contrast in so and so parameters, and because I know with different instruments you'll have different parameters which will be more contrasting. So with this specific piece, what was your main thoughts?
So I mean, I will say there was a lot of trial and error. I mean, I did perform this in front of an audience a couple of times and dramatically change it after that. Part of it, it's just, I guess it was knowing the instrument itself, like just knowing how the instrument, just how resonant it is, and and also knowing how resonant it is and how noisy it is, and that like You can hear it. You can hear like the little staccato notes on a classical guitar, but on an electric guitar you can hear it a lot more. And so I just sort of knew what I could get away with. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, more or less.
Yeah.
You're kind of
Yeah.
working with the sort of resonance of the instrument.
Yeah. Yeah, and frankly, I was just sort of trial and error, and occasionally I just got lucky, I guess.
Great, thank you very much.
No problem. Yeah, Ronnie.
Yeah, hey Nate. Yeah, thanks very much for that. It was really beautiful. I really liked it.
Well, thank you.
And I'm just wondering about the electric guitar, because you said you were like trying to look for ways to get it, or exploring ways to put it in a contemporary classical context, or I can't remember the words you used, but
Yes,
in a probably out of whatever context it's generally been, and so like you played a solo piece there, and so all the timbre of the instrument works obviously really well and really nicely together. And one thing I've noticed with the electric guitar that I find a bit what's sort of off-putting is that the fact that it's going out through a speaker together with other instruments that aren't amplified. The sort of the blending of the timbre is a bit too obvious. It sort of doesn't quite work for me a lot of the time. I mean, sometimes I say with the classical guitar as well, I must say, but but I'm just wondering how you sort of, if you get around that problem in any way, or like what things you found that might work with it.
Yeah, no, it's a great question, because there's been, especially when I started, I played in an orchestra, and that sounded terrible for that exact reason, because it's literally a sound going that way while everyone else's sound's going that way. So a couple of things I've found is A, turning down, that's always a problem, but B, like actually turning the amp backwards, that always helps. That actually helps, like turning it up, or like actually like putting it up so it disperses maybe a little better. Some other, that's the big one. Sort of cutting down on treble frequencies and playing more with the tone itself, because that's the one advantage we do have, is you can actually like EQ it, taking a lot of the mid-range, a lot of the treble out, so you can blend in a little more. And then there's just some other little tricks I think go from guitarist to guitarist, and then it's also just the skill of the composer as well, being able to blend it. But no, it's definitely a problem. And there's also another thing, you can have like multiple speakers as well, but
Right.
I can't afford that.
The direction is quite a big problem when you found, is it?
Yeah.
Right. What about like combinations with? Have you found any good combinations with other instruments?
Yeah, I did like 3 pieces with accordion. Yeah, that was a fun little.
Yeah.
That was fun. That was loads of fun. That I've done an orchestra as well. I've done with a pianist. That was interesting. And then I think, but there's a lot of fertile ground, and I think as composers, there's a lot that can be done, because not a lot has been done. There's been some chamber works, and there's been a good amount of solo works, but there hasn't been a lot of duos or anything like that. So I'll pose that as a challenge.
Nice.
Murray.
Yeah, I have a couple questions regarding the guitar that you selected. I was trying to make out which model it is.
It's a Schecter Extreme.
Oh, a Schecter, okay. What I was wondering is that, especially with guitars, I mean, I have 12 different ones. Each one has such a different personality. And why did you pick this particular one?
So So one, I tried it out and I thought it sounded good. So that was the first thing. But the sort of on a technical level, since I am doing more classical stuff, I wanted as much possible. This is going to get real gearhead. I'm sorry for everyone who's not a gearhead in the thing. So I'll just go by quick. I wanted as versatile a guitar as possible. So I wanted 24 frets, so I can get all those notes. I wanted a bridge that can go up and down, and it's a Floyd Rose. So you can like, yeah, you can dive bomb and all that. If I had my whammy bar with me, don't have it with me right now. And I wanted all the pickups so I could get as much sound as possible. And they're actually one's like a very hot, very loud pickup, a very vintage pickup, and a very smooth pickup. So that's the reason why for the guitar. Yeah.
Now, what about strings? Which strings did you use on it?
I used 46 through 10. So yeah, I use fairly light. I have a very, I think it should be noted again. Sorry, non-guitarist. I have a very high action.
Okay.
Like it's like that much off the fretboard.
Wow.
Yeah, which is fun.
Interesting. Very interesting.
Thank you.
Yeah, that was just, I'm just going to follow on a little bit. There was something definitely struck me in this was, like you said, when he switched to the bridge pickup. I mean, in general, there's a difference in tone and stuff there, but that pickup, you could really hear everything get a bit hotter. And also it's a humbucker, not a single coil, and what, like the difference in sound was a really interesting dimension in this at that point, actually. It struck me, you know, it's not something you could do if this was a classical guitar, kind of have that particular change there. And it really helps, at least to me, help make things shift somewhere else. And that was a really interesting part of it. Yeah, I don't really have much of a question on that because it's kind of already been answered mostly, but it did definitely make sense to be electric and not acoustic or classical in this case, you know? Thought that was pretty interesting. And maybe different to Jake's piece, where I forgot to ask Jake, but kind of like, I wondered if that one had scope to be on a few different instruments, maybe a bit more. This was definitely an electric one.
Jake, do you have a comment to that?
I imagine it could be done on an electric. I'm not sure how easy it would be with, well, all the chords would be possible, though slightly different, because it's all the same frets, all the same frets and notes. So it's probably possible. I don't know whether it would lose a bit, because the classical guitar obviously gets a lot of the sound from the body rather than through the through the electronics. It's always a hard question of whether a classical piece can be played on electric and vice versa.
Yeah, because also technically as well, because I know my classical technique is bullcrap. And also it's just really hard. It's just really hard because of all the spacing and all that.
Yeah, the strings on the electric are so much closer together than on a classical, and the frets on the classical are wider. And the finger picking technique is completely different as well. Yeah,
and also like harmonics and stuff sound a lot different because of what you said about the body. Because sort of going back to Ronnie's thing about dispersion, like the electric guitar, it's all the sound is going through here, whereas the classical guitar, it's all wafting all around in the air. Maybe we should trade pieces.
Yeah, I don't think I'll be able to play yours. I can't play mine, so.
Thank you so much, Nate. It was really great piece, and I know making this level of the dimension for solo instrument is so hard in composition. Well done.
Oh, thank you so much.
Thank you for sharing with us. So we are going to third composer, Geraint Williams.
Hello. So I'm a composer based in Wales, but I've just finished my master's at the Uni of Manchester. The piece that I've got today, not a guitar piece, it's a piece for string quartet. It's one of the first pieces that I wrote during my master's. Probably not the strongest piece that I've written, but I thought it could make a good discussion today, and I'm fairly happy with the piece. So the idea behind the piece was essentially it has 3 contrasting sections, where the middle section kind of sets up, I suppose, an opposition or a dialectic between the sustained material and the rhythmic material, and then that kind of, the rhythmic material overtakes the sustained, which leads into a kind of crawl at the end of the piece. I think it's fairly successful. I think I'll share the score in the chat, but I can also screen share as well, if that's, yeah. And then I'm happy to take questions, of course. One moment. Okay, let me know if the sound works. do we have any? Oh, do you have any questions?
Yeah, I do actually, if I
Okay.
may. By the way, are you a string player? Because your string writing is incredible. Like,
pianist.
cool. Okay, a lot. So I was just like, whoa, especially towards the end, those chords are just magical. But yeah, so my main question was, like, one of the things that I really love about this piece is that there's so much drama. And I think from the title, I kind of gathered that there was like some contrasting characters and sound colors that are sort of in conflict with each other. And I was just wondering how you managed to sort of create a sense of unity despite the fact that they are quite distinct from each other, like within the same ensemble. If that makes sense.
Yeah, sure. Well, I always, from the very beginning of writing that piece, I always had the idea of having a kind of a kind of slow crawl at the end, following a rhythmic section. I just thought that would be an interesting shape. There are certain like pitch materials that you find in the middle section that I use in the chorale, although the chorale is kind of fairly loosely written, so I'm not entirely sure how that comes across. But it's interesting that you mentioned that, because I think that's my issue with the piece, in the sense that, I mean, I think the sections kind of do follow quite well, like the pizzicato material kind of emerges from the beginning, but the rhythmic material kind of is abandoned, I suppose, just as it kind of establishes itself. So I'm not sure the proportions quite work. I feel like the middle section could possibly be longer. But yeah, I suppose it's because I always had that shape in mind, and then I had kind of certain pitch materials that I use in the middle section and the last section. That makes sense. Does that answer your question? Oh, sorry, you muted.
Okay. Yeah, I think more or less. So did you use like a selection of notes?
Well, the sustained material in the middle section comes from the same set, I suppose, as what is used in the chorale. It was used loosely in the chorale, and I mostly focused on voice leading and phrasing, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. One thing that I sort of picked up on was how it seems like it sounds like to me that there's like the attack seems to emerge out of the opening notes,
yeah,
and then splits into like different threads,
okay,
like parallel strains which work alongside each other. That's kind of sort of how I heard it. So I was just wondering, when you sort of planned that concept, if that was what you planned, even that's just my sort of interpretation, is that what kind of considerations did you take into mind, like when you try to create that opposition or contrast between the different threads?
Well, I suppose the middle section is largely kind of stratified. You have the two layers, like initially pizzicato against sustained. With the opening, what I imagined is the opening is just kind of meant to be an introduction, but that kind of attacked E flat, I suppose. I kind of imagined the pitch kind of starting from the E flat and kind of gradually moving out so that you get this E flat F gesture that kind of kickstarts the next section. If that makes sense, you've got that kind of quarter tone movement between E flat and F. And then the E flat gesture kind of brings everything back, so the phrases kind of gradually get larger. And then this middle section, I suppose, is largely stratified, so there's just two layers against each other. Does that quite answer your question? Sorry.
So you mean in terms of harmony? you mostly considered how the harmony would.
Well, the rhythmic material was kind of taken as like it's largely taken from the octatonic scale, and then like kind of well, and then like kind of I suppose on a local basis, I just made sure that the pitches between the two strata in the middle section just kind of work together, if that makes sense. It wasn't a large scale plan. We're just kind of making sure that the pitch wasn't weird, I suppose, or against each other, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's great. Thank you.
Hi, I have a question, again, an observation. Around the second section, there was a real air of mystery created. It almost sounded like it could be part of a score for a James Bond movie. You know, you could see him sort of reconnoitering at night and listening to this part of the score. Was that intentional, or did you were you trying to create sort of that sense of mystery?
I suppose I was trying to go for something dramatic, I suppose. I was kind of thinking about how it all flows together. I kind of, are you referring to the kind of the like tremolo or yeah.
Yes.
I don't know. Mystical is, well, mysterious is quite. I suppose it kind of comes from what I was trying to get, something that was kind of dramatic. I'm glad that you said that. No, thank you.
You never know, you might get a call.
Yeah. Fingers crossed. Are you happy with that response?
Yeah, very much so. Yeah, very much so.
Has Ronnie got a question?
Yeah. Yeah, I'm not quite sure to what extent you answered it already, but just there's a couple of things that are not quite clear. I was just wondering kind of how you chose the notes. You mentioned the octatonic scale, but also like how you planned out the harmony and stuff. Sorry, I meant to say it was lots of fun. I really enjoyed it. It's great. So, but yeah, I was just wondering because all the harmony sounds like it works very nicely, moves lots of colors and stuff and tensions, and they all work great. And just wondering how you chose all the notes for
that. Well, I suppose my approach at each section was different. So as I said in the beginning, I kind of imagined that kind of expanding out from E flat, moving to E flat F. In the middle section, I've got two motifs that are octatonic. So you got bar 30 in the 2/4 bar. I've got the kind of, should I like screen share this actually? I mean, I'm not sure this I've got the most elegant answer. So I suppose this is just one motif, and then this little bar here is also another motif, and then you can kind of see it here as well in the tremolo. And then I start to introduce the pitch material I use in the chorale. And then I suppose I was just kind of thinking about how everything flows together and how I could use phrasing to keep it to make it sound like it's kind of continually moving forward, if that makes sense.
It did have that sense, like it was continually moving forward, and all the rhythms and stuff work together really nicely. And like this bit here, I
Yeah.
mean, was it like I'm sorry, I need to read your name to pronounce it properly, and I'll probably Eliora, is that right? I think Eliora was saying, I think the bit at the end with the how it all the harmony there just sounds very nice. Like, did you just plan chords out, or is it from intervals, or is it tonal? Yeah.
So, well, I kind of used the pitch material from this chord. You can hear like that kind of, you'll get that in the like the upper voice. I kind of got a it's like a different variation of that, and you kind of hear again as like just a kind of little anchor, I suppose, at like the ends of phrases. But largely, I kind of wrote this freely, so I was kind of thinking about relevant. Sorry, not relevant. Like, yeah, well,
related.
Really, yeah. Well, I was just kind of thinking of relative consonance and dissonance and kind of voice leading. I kind of kept this material moving through it, so in certain voices, but I largely wrote it quite freely.
Just like testing at the piano, then.
Yeah. I suppose the phrasing is more important to me in this section, and then the harmony kind of works to achieve that. So like, you've got this little like interpolation here that kind of, this chord just kind of plopped between two phrases. I'm trying to shape what sound like kind of cadential figures, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. And not the most elegant answer, but I suppose.
Yeah. I mean, just nice to hear how you arrived at your what you made, and yes, great stuff. I can ask just one tiny question. I don't know, it might be tiny, might be enormous, but just your title again, dualism.
Yes.
I mean, people design whole like schools of philosophy or spirituality around the idea of dualism or non-dualism. I wonder if that's sort of something that informs the piece, or you're looking for this. Because I think you mentioned the contrast between the two materials. Yeah, is there any other? Is there something else like that?
Well, I chose the title partly because you have those kind of contrasting sections, and then also it's largely alluding to what happens in the middle section, where you've got a kind of opposition between the rhythmic material and the sustained, and then the rhythmic material becomes more prominent. So I suppose it's kind of a conflict between the two. It was a thought that I had after choosing the title. It might have been too strong a title, because, as you said, it kind of links into certain like philosophical ideas that I didn't necessarily intend.
Right.
Great. Congratulations on your piece. Thanks.
Thank you. Do we have any more questions? Does that answer your question, first of all? Go.
Thank you, Geraint. I really enjoyed the piece. And I also wanted to mention you had a really good plan for your dynamic. I could hear how you chose dynamic really precisely, and also I could hear the contrast that you made in your dynamic plan. I think it was so great. Thank you. Well done.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's actually a really good point. I also wanted to ask you, I thought you made a really interesting point, Geraint, earlier, on the idea of relativity in consonance and dissonance. And that's actually something that actually ties a lot of things together in a way, because when I came up with a theme of, or when we came up with a theme of dimension, I was thinking about how much of contrast and opposition is relative, because you don't really notice necessarily if something contrasts with something else unless there's that relativity. And so it's really interesting that you pick up that you made that point, because I was going to ask all of the composers actually how they came to sort of compose that, the context that would bring out the maximum contrast in order to create that sense of dimension, because all the pieces, in my opinion, had that dimension. And I think that is largely because the way the context of all of it is really well planned, and the relative, you know, the relativity is really taken into account. So let's maybe start with the Geraint and then continue from there.
Sure. I suppose for me it was a kind of textural thing, I suppose. Like the crawl is very much homophonic. The ensemble moves together, whereas in the middle section there's you know, they kind of split into two. And then also I suppose just the material itself is very different. Like the middle section is very rhythmic, quick tempo. I know those are basic things, I suppose, but I suppose all of it kind of comes together to create that contrast, I suppose. And then in the opening, I mean, it kind of just starts off at the beginning. It's just kind of starts off. It's just an E flat, if that makes sense, and then that kind of grows. Yeah, I suppose the main thing in my piece is just the kind of three contrasting sections, and then like how I use texture in each of those. If that answers the question.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. Very nicely. And Nate, would you like to talk about if you remember the question?
Yeah. Can you briefly repeat it?
Yeah. So I was talking about how you take into account relativity of effects. So, but the relativity of contrast. So because obviously it's not very, you can only really perceive contrast in the context of what's going on around. So I was wondering to what extent you took that into account and composed it into the piece.
Yeah, I think, yeah, I composed it. What I wanted to have happen was there to be two clear voices. Well, there's a couple more, but it's like clear voices on the electric guitar, without in an unorthodox way. So yeah, that's it. So, and I wanted it because the way we perceive things, the dry staccato notes and then the sustained harmonics, and we do perceive them as two different things, as two different streams. And also, yeah, even though I think they're in the same frequency range for the entire piece. I don't think I think it's, but because of the contrasting timbre, you're able to get some contrast.
That's great. Thank you. And Jake, would you like to give us your insight into this?
Yeah, so I think with my piece, it was the contrast in the print that I was inspired by is such an important part of it, of the print, that I wanted to explore those ideas. So with the piece beginning kind of shifting between the noise and pitch spectrum quite gradually in movement, but quickly moving between in the overall length of the piece. You kind of you get to see the kind of contrast quite early on, and then I wanted to kind of, when I got to the middle of the piece, take one of those elements away, at which point it goes into a very melodic section, which for me is kind of relating to how you can perceive the print in different ways. You can either see it as kind of the two parts merging together, and the bird and the fish kind of heading together and then splitting apart, or one heading into the other. Or you can focus on the fact that there's just one. If you look from the top to the bottom, you can see the bird pretty clearly, but it does get lost eventually. But if you look hard enough, you can still see it. So, and then kind of returning to the original idea at the end, A gives it a bit of a rounded structure that that hopefully people seem to like circular structures where you get to where you were at the beginning, but also that element that was taken away from the beginning returns, and you're able to see the contrast again, possibly more clearly because the contrasting element was removed for a while.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Yeah, I like it that it takes you back where you started, but with a slightly different perspective, which is great. And it's interesting also the way you talk about the print, because I actually read a really interesting article which basically talked about this psychological experiment where they had a similar kind of image where you can either perceive it as one or the other, and it was basically talking about how people have a 3-second attention span where they basically flip over between different sort of perspectives. So within like every 3 seconds, they would see the opposite like interpretation kind of thing, which is just really interesting. And it just made me think of that.
Is that the duck and the rabbit?
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
That's just, it's so cool. And I kind of get the same sense with this piece. It's a sort of like, it's so repetitive in a way, but it's like you can shift perspective between like listening out for one, kind of feature and then listening out for another. So it's really a really lovely piece. So yeah, thank you.
Sorry, just to add on with what you were talking about the print there, another interesting thing is that to consider with the print is that the element that is slowly being lost also within the print, whether you're looking from bird to fish or fish to bird, the element that is slowly being lost does slowly, well, one wouldn't exist without the other. The space that the fish leaves behind and becomes blurred, and you can't fully make out the detail of the fish anymore, means that you are able to see the bird. So the contrast is almost even more important there, I suppose.
Wow. Yeah. Wait, so what was the element, just out of interest?
Within the print or within
the music?
Just the noise. I was just doing noise to pitch spectrum. So that the beginning bit where you've got changes between the two.
Right. Nice. That's a really great metaphor, actually. I can really see that. That's brilliant. Genius. Okay, so I think we're kind of coming to a close. Are there any more questions for any of the composers? No? Okay, so just to wrap up, thank you so much to everyone involved, all the composers, especially to Atabear for like coming last minute to the rescue when I couldn't be here on time because of the festival ending a lot later than I thought. So thank you so much for taking on that responsibility. And thank you to, obviously, to all the performers that played in these pieces and these recordings. I also wanted to say something about, so if you have any feedback, it would be really great if you could pop us an email. I'll post it just in the chat. Just because, it's always useful for us. And also to let you know that we have a mailing list, which we send out every month, a newsletter, sorry, which we send out every month to inform you on new events coming up and just like basically more about the new forums and what our programs are going to be. So if you'd like to opt out of this mailing list, do let us know. And also just to let you know what's coming up next is we have a series of music and colour workshops which we're going to start, which is basically it's like you don't need any experience in either music or, well, obviously most of you do, but you don't need any experience in art. It's just a very interesting way of exploring your interpretation of music, but also exploring your own state of mind and just converting it onto paper. And I've sort of experimented a lot with this idea, and Atafe and I have been working together on this for a while now, so it will be really interesting and exciting. And we haven't actually set out the exact dates, but just watch out for the newsletter for more details on that. And yeah, so thank you everyone for coming and supporting this forum. We hope to see you all again on the first Sunday of next month, which I believe is the 2nd. So thank you so much. See you soon.
Thank you, guys.
You. See you
Fantastic. Really enjoyed it. Thanks a lot.
And probably as the one farthest away in Canada here, I really enjoyed it. And you can see the sun is still shining outside because it's only 4:30.
Oh, wow. That's great. That's very lucky for you then. It's quite late for people in Greece. Maria, I'm talking about you. I don't know whether she's still here actually.
Yeah, I'm here like 11:30 at night.
I think you're still awake. I'd be asleep by now.
It's fine. Like, that was amazing actually. And glad to hear everyone.
Yeah, great. See you next month. Bye-bye.
See you. Bye.